Good evening, South Brunswick. I'm calling the meeting to order. Please rise for the salute of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meeting of public bodies in which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the board secretary has caused notice of this meeting, including date, time, and location, to be posted in South Brunswick Public Library and the board office, filed with the township clerk, and communicated to the Home News Tribune and the Star Ledger. Mr. Pulaski, roll call, please.
Mr. Raja Krishna? Yeah. Mr. Ray Keener? Present. Mrs. Joyce Mehta? Mr. Mike Mitchell? Present. Dr. Stephen Parker? Here. Dr. Smitha Raj? Mrs. Lisa Rogers? Present. Mr. Joseph Scaletti? Here. Mr. Barry Nathanson? Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Pulaski. Approval of tonight's agenda. I have a motion. Moved by Dr. Parker, second by Ray Keener. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Moving along. Open to the public. The Board of Education recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues, the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on school matters of community interest. Complete copies of the rules that govern this portion of the meeting are available to the public at the back of the room, or you can obtain an advance copy by contacting the board office during regular business hours. We reserve the right to limit each speaker to no more than 3 minutes. It's our plan to listen to each member of the public. We will note all questions and comments made. Once all questions and comments from all members of the public are made, the Board of Education will respond, if necessary, to questions or comments in the most timely and efficient manner available. Please consider not repeating comments and questions made by other members of the public. I ask that you state your name, spell your last, place of residence, or your group affiliation. Mr. Pulaski, is there anyone sign up prior to the meeting?
We have no pre-registrations at this time.
Okay, so move to open to the public. Anyone have any questions or comments? Seeing no hands, I'll close the public portion. Moving along, approve action items tonight, the consent agenda. I have a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Moved by Ray Keener. I have a second.
Rogers, second.
Mrs. Rogers, second. Mr. Fetter, would you like to? Discussion, sorry.
I recommend we do have a bit of a discussion tonight. I think it'd be important for the board to, if we all just kind of take a step back for a moment and discuss what actually happens at a board meeting and the process that is available to the board to discuss the topics on the agenda. In fact, the reason we're here tonight is because that did not happen. And we are here really not knowing why we're here. We are here because the motion on the agenda did not pass at the last meeting, yet there was no discussion at the last meeting about anything at all related to the motion. There were abstentions, there were no votes, there were yes votes, and there was not a word spoken by any board member on any side of the topic. So that's something we can work on together as a board. And I think that we can strengthen our transparency to our community, which is extremely important. Transparency is important for my office to the board members, from board members to board members, from board members to my office, and of course, from myself and of course the board to the public. So I would imagine there are people in our public who have no idea why there's a board meeting tonight. And it's a tricky one. I mean, this was the motion was surrounded textbooks. So as of right now, based upon last meeting, if we did not hold a special meeting, technically, we would not be allowed to use any textbooks at all in the whole district. So that kind of vote derailed, or could have derailed, the entire school district. The question would be, why? That's important, and I think our public would want to know. I know I want to know. So I think what we want to do tonight is kind of share a process that exists to the board that we're not operating with unilaterally. So let's try and think of that. So here's what the process could look like. So tonight we had a motion. The motion was approved and seconded, meaning at that moment in time, it does not have to be voted upon. At that moment in time, the word discussion comes next. And that avails to the board members the opportunity to discuss, ask questions, make any kind of statement they want about an item on the consent agenda. In fact, they can go a step further and even ask for an item in the consent agenda to be separated out from the whole agenda, to be discussed and voted upon separately. I don't know that we all know that, and I want to make sure I do, because that's on me. That's my responsibility to make sure you do know all the rules and all what's availed to you to make sure we are transparent and that you have the information you need to make informed decisions. That's important to me. It's important to my team. I'd imagine it's important to the public, that people that they elect have the information they need to make a valid, informed decision. With that said, that does not mean, by any stretch, that that decision has to be in agreement with my recommendation. Of course, I try to make recommendations that I believe are best for the district. However, it could easily be seen at any time for any potential reason that someone disagrees with one of those recommendations. And when that happens, that is not necessarily a bad thing at all. That happens. We don't always have to agree. In fact, in my presentation to our staff this yesterday, I started with the concept of the theme this year, which is to unify. The board should do its best to unify. Unify does not mean agree. In fact, one of the rules I live by is understanding is the goal. Agreement is the gravy. And that's an important concept. For understanding to happen, sometimes there needs to be discussion. Sometimes there needs to be the ability to ask questions. And if we have those answers, of course, they should be public. That's why this meeting, just to be clear with all of our board members and public who are watching and are here, thank you guys for coming tonight, this is a board meeting for the board that happens in public. It's not a public meeting. A board meeting is a board meeting that happens in public. And the reason that happens in public are the sunshine laws, and of course the real reason of the board should act in public, not in private, because it is taxpayer money. It is taxpayer interest. So tonight, I thought it would be a great opportunity for us to model and see how it goes. And I think keep reinforcing this at each meeting so that we really feel good about our ability to share. And for me, you know, I wish I could tell you I'm perfect, but I wasn't even perfect by 8 o'clock this morning. And if you're not sure of that, you can ask my wife. I'm sure she'll tell you why I wasn't perfect by 8 o'clock this morning, and 8 o'clock yesterday morning, 8 o'clock the day before. When we put a board agenda together, it takes a good deal of time from a lot of people. We actually have a meeting with about 7 or 8 people about every week to go over the agenda items and the motions and what we have to do to make sure we provided the board with all the information they need. It's pride for us. It's pride because we don't want to make mistakes. We don't like when there's even a spelling error in the board agenda. But I will tell you, it's happened where we've accidentally left off backup items. We've made mistakes on motions. We've had dates wrong. We've had numbers wrong. It's a very extensive process that we try not to, and I would say we're right 80, 90% of the time, maybe more than that, but we do make mistakes. And if we do, I am absolutely okay with board members letting me know and asking for what they need so that we can provide you with what you need, because you guys really are the people who the township elected to represent their interests and the interests of these students in this community. That's important stuff. So As we look at today, we are here because we did not pass a motion to approve textbooks. Again, what that means is technically there would be no approved textbooks for the school year to start, which starts next week. So we ask ourselves, what happened here? Like, we would try to diagnose this issue. The reason I'm interested in diagnosing it is that way we can make sure it doesn't happen again. And I take ownership for something like that that happens. In this case, I was not aware of any issue other than a couple of questions, a little vague, that came our way kind of on the 11th hour of the board meeting. So it makes it difficult that way, but I understand that. It's a time commitment and it's very tricky. So what happened last time is we had 7 board members present, 2 members were absent, and 3 members voted yes, 3 members voted to abstain. An abstention vote, just so the board knows and anyone public watching knows, an abstention means I don't have an opinion. I don't have enough information. I don't want to vote on this. I don't cast any vote. That could happen for many reasons. What we do is we usually provide all of our board members with the information they need to sometimes abstain, because the rule of ethics does not allow a board member to vote on a motion where they are somehow involved. They have to recuse themselves through an abstention. So last meeting, there was a motion on the board where we were approving the $900 cost for school boards. So what we did is we broke that up because it affects everybody, and we broke it up evenly so that each board member would know what they needed to abstain from so that they would not be in an ethics violation of voting on something for their own gain, right? That's something we try to avoid. So what we do is you would have heard if you watched last week or any of the board members were paying attention, you voted to abstain or should have voted to abstain on the motion where you were being named as a person where taxpayer money was being spent on you. So that didn't even happen correctly last week. So there are board members who did not abstain correctly on their own item. Therefore, they actually voted to award themselves with this opportunity to go to a convention. Now, again, is that malicious? Of course not. But if we follow these rules and we talk about when we abstain, we talk about when we have a question or a concern or a topic, then that would be less likely to have those errors that we have to then go and correct. In this particular case, I don't know if there were errors related to this motion, but it is unclear exactly as to why the motion didn't pass. Maybe we can shed some light on that today. So what I would like to do is back up a little bit now and say, okay, we have a motion for the consent agenda. Today the consent agenda is only one agenda item, and that is to approve the textbook list for the school district. So what would happen is we have a motion, we have the motion, we have the second motion, now we're in discussion. So in discussion, I would say open it up. Does anyone have anything at all they'd like to share, ask, discuss related to this motion? What happens from here? People would talk. David, as the board secretary, records. The good news is we also have it on video, so if he's not as quick as he needs to be with his pen, he can go back and check that out. And that way we can learn from each other. And I, as a superintendent, can work with my office to ensure that we're providing the information needed so that our board members can make informed decisions. So with that said, is there discussion on the issue of textbooks?
Yes. Roger.
So I abstained from it because I didn't have enough information to what are the books, how is the process done, and which is the body that approves books for the school. And is it the information vetted in the books? Because it is getting disseminated to kids at all levels.
Right.
And it is very important that we, as senior members of the public, not exactly the board, but the teachers, parents, everybody knows actually that it has been vetted by some body and it is good to go into schools.
Right.
And there may be some times that, those books require a review periodically.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure if that is getting done and are we achieving the result. so that kids are given the right information, whether it is history, whether it is religion, whether it is, any kind of rules and regulations that the government does, everything all to put together. Maths, science normally is generally in the same lines, but everything that changes or has opinion that can be put in books, just want to make sure that that is getting vetted.
So to reflect, what you're looking for is the process in which
Right.
this happens,
Right.
and then you want to be sure and comfortable that the administration
Yeah,
is doing that, and if we are able to demonstrate that, you would feel more comfortable voting on such a big topic.
absolutely. Like, if there is a head of the group who says in an open meeting or by a document that all these books has been re-vetted or vetted at this time by these people who are authorized to do that, and it is good to go with the school system in this new year.
That's excellent. Thank you, Raja, for sharing that. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Anybody else? Dr. Park?
Yeah, Dr. Park.
Is it true that sometimes we have books on the list where only a portion of a book is used in a class? So if a book is on the list, doesn't mean that all of a book is used. Sometimes needed for a class or a curriculum that only a piece of these books are used.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we not every textbook is perfect. So we would buy a textbook based upon a thorough review of the textbook first. But I'll hold, if you don't mind, I'll hold on that question because it goes along with Raja's question, where I'll be able to share, and Jen and I will be able to share a little bit of a process that's used to how these things wind up on here, which is, I think, the question also, Raja.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, how does this happen? Like, where does this book come from? It just comes out of thin air, or is there a process?
And to add another point to it,
the mic.
which can be considered, there was a lot of information, and I cannot vouch to it. There was a lot of information that there are articles and lessons in books that were reflecting about the history of a particular country which was not correct. And we just need to make sure that whoever is vetting it, they have the authority and the knowledge of saying, okay, this information is not correct, we need to remove it, or this information is correct, it can be there. So those aspects also we need to look at.
Kind of back to the process. How do
Yes.
we do this? Yeah, we'll do that in a second, Raj. See if anyone has any other discussion points or questions.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that everybody's understanding and make sure I understand it correctly. But the books that are recommended are based on our curriculum committee, of which 3 board members serve on, and they make the recommendations to the board and follow the superintendent's lead as far as what we are going to include in the curriculum. So therefore, 3 members of the board we have put to task to verify that everything meets our needs. They're our mouthpiece when they serve on the committee. That's how that gets then put onto the agenda.
Yeah, there's actually a little bit of a process even before that, Ray,
Correct.
which we'll talk about as well. But yeah, part of the process is curriculum committee. Anyone else? Well, if you don't mind, Mike, if I can ask, Mike, you had voted no. A no vote means you don't believe that any of the books at all should be used at all, that we should not have any textbooks on that list or any list that you know of. That's probably not accurate, I would imagine. I don't think you would think that, but maybe you do. I don't know. But
No, I don't think that way.
What can I help with, Mike,
Because I'm
that
an
would
educator
help?
myself, and I believe, in providing the best possible text for our students to be able to grow into the individuals that we want them to be someday. My only issue was I just didn't have the information I needed, and so that's why I voted no. It's no sense of going into a whole spiel about why I did what I did. It's just I felt like I didn't have enough information, and I decided to vote no instead of abstaining.
Yeah. All right, thank
And
you.
it wasn't to go against the grain, because that's what it may sound like. I made the vote, I made a conscious decision, and now that we are here now and I saw the information that I needed to see, I'm ready to place a more affirmative vote.
Yeah.
But before that, and I apologize to our chair here, but, I had to vote the way I voted.
Yeah. I'm actually, so just to be clear with this board, I'm never going to, I would never want you to vote yes just because I make a recommendation. So don't think that, please, Mike.
Absolutely.
Not at all. My goal right now is the education of all of us, and at the process helping the public understand, because we're in a bit of a weird situation tonight, and so we just want to make sure, hey, well, how did we get here, and how do we make sure we don't get here again? Even though we could get here again, because rather than it being a no vote because you weren't clear on what was available to you, it's a no vote because you actually disagree, right? And that could still happen. Like, it could be that, I present a motion and Mike and Lisa and Stephen are like, no way, I don't like this motion, I'm voting no on that, right? And if 5 people or more vote no, that motion doesn't go anywhere. And I don't think the board should ever feel that they would have to vote a certain way. So thank you for saying that, Mike. I appreciate that. And please understand, from my perspective as a superintendent, I want you to vote how you believe you should vote.
Right.
What I need to do is make sure you have what you need to do that vote. So what I want to model today, after we hear, I think Joe had his hand up, is to make sure we have a process where exactly what Raja said tonight, what Stephen said tonight, what you said tonight, happens on that night, and where you don't feel that you don't have a place to do that. So we can talk about that a little bit in a second. But thanks, Raja. Thanks, Mike, so far. Stephen, Ray, and Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. When we get the consent agenda sent to us, there's a lot to it, and you guys do a heck of a job putting everything out there. And, I'll be the first one to admit that there's stuff on there that I just don't understand, but there's also procedures that have to be in place. We have procedures with our parents that we set forth as this district, as far as instead of running to the principal or running to the superintendent, there's a chain of command. And I think, for myself, using this a lot, there's a chain of command for the board as well. If there's something, I'm the chairman of the facilities. If someone doesn't understand something about what's going on in facilities, they contact me. If I can't answer it, or if I don't know it, then we pass it up to David. And then from David, it'll go to Scott. And it's the same I feel with this here is if we don't understand something, which we're not going to understand everything. We're not in education like Jen and you and David. But if we have questions, there's a chain of command. Go to the chairman. What is this? What exactly is this? If they can't help you, then you move up the ladder, And I think by us being openly saying, hey, listen, I don't understand something, that will then help us everybody to understand it. So I think the chain of command, yes, we set it forth with our parents and with our students and everything else, but it's also for the board to say, hey, I just don't understand this. Can you explain this to me? And every time I've done it, everybody's explained it to us, and you get an understanding of it. So that's all I wanted to say.
And I think it's important to note, so that other members of the board know, that is why we changed the date or the day of our meeting, was so that the board was able to get the consent agenda at least a day earlier, so that we had time to go through it, because in the past we didn't have enough time to read it and really understand it. So that's why we have changed the dates of the meeting, so that we do have more transparency and more time to digest everything and ask questions, so that we can make an informed decision.
So,
I just want to just dovetail a little bit off of what Joe had mentioned, that whenever you have to consider the fact that there's multiple committees on this board, and those committees are in charge of ensuring that the various aspects of that particular issue, maybe a facilities issue, a curriculum issue, a policy issue, is addressed within the committee. Just like any legislative body, there are committees. So if there's an issue or a question on the consent agenda, any individual that's not on that committee it can always go to a committee member or the committee chair for clarification. And I, as the committee chair, if I don't have that answer, I will make sure it is addressed with either Scott or Jen or David if it has to do with a particular issue in my committee. So I really implore all of the members that whenever there's any question regarding facilities, policy, negotiations, budget, or curriculum, those are the 5 committees, correct me if I missed one, that any member on the committee can be asked the question, and that if that committee member doesn't know the answer, they can go to the chair, and the chair can go to superintendent. Anybody on the committee can go to the superintendent. So there is, it makes it easier in terms of management to make sure that these 5 areas are covered by members on this board. So that's the only thing I wanted to add, that we need to make sure that the communication between the members that are not in a committee happens within a committee. Thank you.
Yeah. So what I like to do is offer some insight into the process, and I'm going to add.
Can I say one thing first? And then you can. So, any memo or anything that I send out, I always put, if you have a question or concern, please reach out to me either by email or phone, okay? And a lot of your members for the last couple of years have done that, If you have a question or a concern, then I can filter it to the right person to get the answer to you. So, it happens a lot. That's why I ask you to CC the Vice President and myself on all your correspondence. So we're involved in getting the answers out. So I like Scott said, we're going to try to not get to this place again. So go ahead, Scott.
So I want to, for Roy Raja, propose I think this will help. I'm going to share a little bit about how we do this. As it relates to adoption of textbooks, there's quite a lengthy process that happens that goes through. Usually it's some pilots where we actually utilize the textbooks with teachers and students to see how they feel, how they fit, do they match what we need. That process can sometimes take up to a year of doing that. By the time it gets to the curriculum committee, they would get a kind of a sneak peek of the process and what's going on. And then if there's a new adoption of a textbook, that would actually come to the board, and probably the whole community would see a presentation on that. The reason that didn't happen, there's nothing new going on this. In fact, the list is the exact same list from last year because we didn't adopt anything new. In a pandemic, there was obviously, that wasn't the first thing we would do, is start doing full book reviews during a pandemic. So this particular list, why in our minds was kind of pro forma, was because there was nothing new about it. In fact, we don't even have to put that on the list. We didn't even have to have this motion exist. It doesn't even have to be there because there was nothing new. We do it to keep it fresh. In other words, to say every year, because there's new board members, that they are involved in that. What happened here, learning, is that the actual document, which is an insanely long document that I would never expect an entire board to look through every single one of those lines, wasn't attached, which is, I think, Mike, where you might have been coming from, is there was no attachment. When you looked at the motion, there was no attachment. So, that's one of our issues that we need to make sure is good. How it could help me is, let me know, right? And then we can see what we can do. The problem, of course, sometimes is we work on very tight schedules, and it's not like you have 3 weeks to go through all this, and it could take 3 weeks to go through these agendas sometimes. So, kudos to the board members for, getting done what you've done. I guess what might need to happen at sometimes, and the way I think, Joe, you explained that is probably true. Sometimes I would ask you to put your trust in us, in the sense that sometimes it's understand that we have a big process. We take these things very seriously. And I think if we would have had this exact conversation, to your point before, last time, we probably wouldn't be here tonight. And that's what I want to change on the process here, is that we actually have this so people know this process exists, that anyone could have said what they need to say or ask questions, and then we can go through those questions publicly. And that's what we're here for. And so I know for my office, we don't like when we make mistakes, and we own them. And I know that we could do better as a board by having these discussions when they're needed. And sometimes they're just going to be needed. Roger also brought up a good point. We are facing history, which is ever-changing, and it's very complex. We have shared, and in fact, this board approved an RFP, the meeting before, to approve a motion for a complete review, even hiring a consultant to help us with that review. And the topic of how we use our books, what materials are taught, how we align our curriculum to the standards, how we look at social justice and how we look at reforms, and all of the things, Roger, that I think you were talking about would fall into that. So we have informed the board that that is on the way and happening. And that is part of, one of the issues would be, of course, looking at that issue of how certain religions are portrayed. And now, again, we don't really do religion per se in a public school, but there are elements of religion that are taught in a more global context. So I don't know, Jen, if I added enough on that, or if you have any more expertise to, into the mic?
Yes, I could just point out that the standard that they were talking about, I think that's in question. I just want to point out that it's a 6th grade standard. It's not a lengthy unit depthly going into any one religion. The standard itself just talks about comparing, contrasting the tenets of various world religions that developed in or around this time period. So this is ancient civilizations. So this conversation happened in a curriculum committee meeting with some sharing of materials that we use to support that came from a foundation. That foundation isn't on our resource list, and I just want to point that out because it's a slideshow that was shared, but we do find and utilize some great resources. Every single textbook that we purchase, every single page of it isn't always perfect or used. So I think it should be understood, and that's not just in this one textbook. It's in many of the books we have. You never necessarily find the one perfect thing. Another example is how slavery is portrayed. You know, that looks different in different textbooks, and we try to find a book that's overall going to serve the purpose of the standards in a curriculum. And, you know, so I think that question about the religious piece, just in context, this is a 6th grade, very broad. It's about a 2-day lesson about various. There's not depth to it, but there are alternative resources used to be able to give students the appropriate information generally about the different religions.
Yeah. And actually, that conversation happened in curriculum committee.
Yeah, with notes for
four
everybody.
board members present. And at that curriculum committee meeting, it was discussed at length. And then
Yes.
what occurred after that, after we do a committee meeting, if you remember, we changed the structure for committee meetings for more transparency with the full board, is a set of minutes went out. And a set of minutes talked specifically about this topic that it was discussed. It's part of our review. And the textbook was discussed as certain chapters of that textbook related to the issues at hand were not being used. And that was all discussed. So that part of it was discussed. And I think what would have happened if we had established this process cleaner is that would have all happened last week. And that discussion would have happened. And we would have been able to have those discussions. And I think that's healthy. And even if there's disagreement, it's healthy. It's okay if we all don't see it the same way. It's not necessary. In fact, it's not your job. It's not what you were elected in this office to do. You were not elected to be a rubber stamp of the superintendent. And what I like about where we are right now is it's forcing our hand to do what we're doing tonight. And that is a positive takeaway from a rather clunky situation from last week. So this is our turning lemons into lemonade. We learn from this. My office learns from it. As board, hopefully we learn from it. And I know that I want to always provide the board with everything they need, as well as the public. And we're going to continue to try and improve on that. Information flow is monumental. It is just the ultimate task to do that. And there's always work to improve on that. So, yeah, Dr. Parker.
Yeah, I think, one of the things to realize that this is a big school district. And if anybody looks at the consent agenda, there are a lot of items on there. And we're volunteers. It's really difficult to have time to look at every single item on there. So I'm on the finance committee, so I make sure I look at those. And I make sure that, if it's a policy issue, I assume the policy committee's looked at it. If it's a curriculum issue, I trust my curriculum committee to have looked at it. It's nice to see the minutes of those meetings so we all have more information. But we need to do that because there's a lot of information there and it's very difficult to see, now often if I have a question that's a policy or curriculum, then I can ask it. The other thing is, when you put out a board update, which we get frequently, we get an email that says there's an update for you to read. I don't think we get an email that says the agenda is ready. And that would be helpful. I don't remember seeing
I
them,
think we do, but we'll check on that,
we
Steve.
do.
but check.
We will.
Because that's useful to know when it's up, because that allows me to schedule my time better to spend more time looking at it,
Yeah,
because it's usually, what,
Monday, Tuesday.
48 hours before the meeting or more? So
We're
it
looking,
gives-
yeah, we're interested in giving you as much time as we can. The
yeah.
issue with the
So it
agenda,
gives us time
Yeah.
to schedule time to go
yeah,
to the portal
We can
and
look at
review
that.
all that information,
yeah.
and I just find that helpful.
Thank you, Steve.
Steve, so Mary Ann Murphy sends out, the minute it's on the portal, Mary Ann Murphy sends out an email saying that it's on the portal for us to look at, so.
Okay, we'll make sure,
Yeah,
we'll make sure.
check. Make sure
Lisa,
I'm on the list.
Just a quick point, it's really for the public. If anyone is interested in seeing what the social studies curriculum is about, it's accessible on the board website, on the district website. So you could actually go through, and I actually have it here, because that's what we're doing now with the RFP, so I'm trying to familiarize myself a little bit more with the social studies curriculum, but all the curriculums are accessible. So any parent can go in and look at it, and it's fairly simple to go through. The one question I had, Mr. Federer, and we really didn't get a chance to discuss it, is given the list of the books is pretty intense, is it possible to put that list of textbooks out there for the public, or is that too much of
now it's a public document.
Yeah, that definitely can be, and it might be, it's probably much more helpful. Every single curriculum document, parent guide
Ties
has all
to
the
it.
textbooks, resources that's in it, so you
Right.
can see what goes with
Yeah.
what. So that
Otherwise-
list has really no context in the sense, it's an alphabetical list of titles where every single curricula has the textbooks listed within.
Yeah, if it's an approved textbook assigned to a
Great.
curriculum, it's actually organized in a much more manageable way for the public.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're looking at a list and like I said, it's like size 4
It's just an
font.
That's great.
alphabetical list,
30
20
pages.
29 pages long.
I mean, it's just a.
That's fine.
It's really, that task is created solely for board approval.
Yep.
But the reality is, again, next year, it won't be on the agenda. The only thing that will be on the
Yeah, it's
agenda,
good new
we're going to make an adjustment, is if we are adopting new.
Yep.
If there's nothing
Great.
new, that way the board can actually manage that new, and that's really important. So
That's a good idea.
that's a change we're going to, so again, I look at what happened, it was a little bit odd, for probably the public, for me, for everybody, but look where we're going to get to from it.
Yep.
Right, so we gain, and I think we can become stronger, and I think that's really valuable. I thank everyone for their input, and Dr. Parker, on the finance, just so you know, I always change the decimal point to see if you're watching. Just one though, just one. With that said, is there any more discussion?
Mr. Pulaski, roll call, please.
Can we just clarify what we're...
You're just voting on the one motion tonight.
Right.
It's just the motion to approve the textbook. It's
One
yeah.
point.
So this, the roll call?
Yep, it's a roll call. Mr. Raja Krishna,
Yes.
Mr. Ray Keener,
Yes.
Mrs. Joyce Mehta, Mr. Mike Mitchell,
Yes.
Dr. Stephen Parker,
Yes,
Dr. Smith Raj, absent, Mrs. Lisa Rogers,
Yes?
Mr. Joseph Scaletti, Mr. Barry Nathanson.
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. I want to thank you, Mr. Federer, and I want to thank the board members for being honest and, again, in a regular setting, you can separate anything out for discussion, or you can discuss when I ask for the motion, you can discuss anything on there. So that being said, I'd like to adjourn the meeting. We do have a regular scheduled meeting next Thursday, correct? Next Thursday night, regular scheduled meeting, regular time, which is 7 o'clock here. Good night, South London. No. What? Motion to adjourn, sorry.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Mr. Keener, second by Mr. Scalea. All in favor? Any opposed? Good night, South Brunswick.